What happens when a woman the world has come to admire for her warmth, intelligence, and quiet authority suddenly shows a side of herself no one has ever seen before? When one of Hollywood's most respected actresses sits across from one of daytime television's most beloved hosts, you expect charm, laughter, thoughtful conversation, maybe even a heartfelt moment or two. What nobody expected was a slow-motion collision that would leave the studio frozen, viewers stunned, and both women scrambling to regain their footing in front of millions. This is the interview that blindsided everyone. The moment Emma Thompson went from collected and charismatic to fiery and unrestrained on national television. And it all began so simply, so predictably, that no one noticed the fuse had been lit until it was already burning fast. The studio was buzzing that afternoon, the kind of easy, cheerful electricity people have come to associate with the Kelly Clarkson show. The crew moved, briskly but calmly. The audience laughed easily, and Kelly herself stepped onto the stage with the confident, radiant energy that made her a household name. She wore a sunflower yellow dress that seemed to glow under the lights, her smile bright and inviting as she waved to the crowd and took her seat. The applause swelled, faded, and then she introduced her guest with genuine excitement in her voice. Emma Thompson, two-time Academy Award winner, beloved writer, activist, and all-around icon, was here to talk about her newest film, a project that was already stirring up buzz months before its release. Emma walked out with that relaxed, self-possessed gait she'd perfected after decades in the spotlight. Her navy blazer draped elegantly over her shoulders, her silver hair cut in a stylish sweep that gave her an air of timeless sophistication. She hugged Kelly, waved to the audience, and settled comfortably into the chair across from the host. Everything was exactly as it should have been. Two charismatic women, both adored by millions, ready to chat about cinema, life, and whatever else came up. The interview began flawlessly. Kelly asked about the film, a poignant story about love, loss, and rebuilding. Emma answered with warmth and humor, sharing stories from set, little quips about the director, and thoughtful insights into why she chose the role. The audience laughed when she laughed, nodded when she grew serious, and everything flowed with the smoothness of a conversation between two people who genuinely respected each other. That, after all, was what viewers loved about Kelly. She made everyone, actors, musicians, politicians, feel like they were chatting with an old friend. It wasn't until the 8-minute mark that something in the atmosphere shifted. Kelly leaned forward slightly, her tone still gentle but her question more probing. She said she'd been reading a lot about Emma lately and wanted to touch on something the actress had said in an earlier interview. Emma had spoken candidly about the pervasive ageism in Hollywood, about the way women were valued differently from their male counterparts once they crossed an invisible line, somewhere between ingénue and experienced. Kelly asked, with that trademark softening of her voice, whether Emma still stood by those comments. Emma's smile dimmed just a touch, not enough for the audience to notice, but enough for anyone paying close attention. She took a slow breath before answering. Yes, she stood by every word. Yes, ageism and sexism remained rampant. Yes, she spoke up because too few people with her level of influence did. Her answer was calm, measured, utterly reasonable. Kelly nodded along, but there was a hint of something else there. A slight tightening around her eyes, the tiny inhale of someone preparing to step onto thinner ice. I hear you, she said. I really do. But some people, just some people, felt your comments came off a little bitter. The word dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. The audience's reaction was instantaneous, a small collective gasp, the kind that fluttered through the studio like a breeze. Emma's expression didn't change right away, but something behind her eyes did. A flicker of irritation, a flash of disbelief. She repeated the word, bitter, as if it tasted strange in her mouth. Kelly immediately tried to cushion it. She lifted her hands, shook her head, clarified that she wasn't calling Emma bitter. Of course she wasn't. She was simply repeating what some people had said, and she wanted to give Emma a chance to respond. You know how it is in interviews. Provide clarity, offer context, shape the narrative. But Emma didn't let it go. She asked who these some people were. Critics? Anonymous commenters? People uncomfortable with women speaking up about injustice. Were they people in power? Were they benefiting from the very system Emma had criticized? Her tone wasn't aggressive yet, but it had sharpened, gaining an edge that sent a ripple through the crowd. Kelly tried to laugh it off lightly, but it didn't land. She shifted, visibly uncomfortable, and tried to reassure Emma that she wasn't attacking her. The goal, she claimed, was conversation. Healthy, open conversation. But Emma wasn't buying it. She leaned forward with a seriousness that made the room shrink around them. She called out the coded language, bitter, confrontational, difficult, that society had long used to silence women who dared to demand more than they were offered. Kelly's smile vanished completely. She looked unsettled and kept glancing toward her producers, perhaps hoping for a cue or an escape route. But the cameras were rolling, and the audience was locked in, unable to look away. When Kelly said she knew the industry was hard and that she, too, understood the struggles women faced, Emma let out a humorless laugh. She explained in clear-cutting detail the reality of what struggle meant in Hollywood. Women deemed too old at 40, offered roles that reduced them to grandmothers while male actors the same age remained romantic leads, paid far less despite equal or greater talent. Kelly pushed back again, but gently, carefully, arguing that things were changing, that women were getting more opportunities. She even pointed to Emma's career as proof, but Emma wasn't having it. She called the idea that women should be grateful for the crumbs they received insulting. Kelly tried to protest, but each argument she made seemed only to dig her deeper. The tension grew thicker, heavier. Emma stood up abruptly, her voice rising with controlled anger. She accused Kelly of diminishing her, of using her platform to undermine a legitimate critique by framing it as emotional rather than structural. Kelly rose too, her face flushed, her voice cracking as she pleaded for Emma to sit down. But Emma wasn't ready to be calmed. She talked about responsibility, how someone with a platform like Kelly's had a duty to ask better, deeper, more responsible questions. Kelly apologized, but Emma pointed out that intention didn't outweigh impact. Kelly insisted she was just doing her job. Emma countered that reducing systemic inequality to a personal flaw wasn't journalism, it was dismissal in disguise. The studio was silent. Even the sound operators had stopped shifting. You could practically hear the hum of the lights above them. Then Kelly said something she shouldn't have, something that seemed to slip out before she could stop herself. She suggested that if Emma couldn't handle tough questions, maybe she shouldn't make bold statements publicly. The gasp that followed was louder this time, more collective, like a wave crashing. Emma froze, her eyes narrowing, her expression shifting from anger to outright disbelief. She stepped closer to Kelly, not threateningly, but assertively, and accused her of hypocrisy. Kelly, she said, used her sweet persona as cover for provocative questions designed to generate good television. Kelly defended herself with shaking hands, insisting she only asked what everyone was thinking. Emma challenged her again. Why not ask about the film, the role, the work? Why go for the angle guaranteed to stir controversy? Kelly claimed she was acknowledging what was relevant. Emma insisted that the only reason it was relevant was because someone decided drama made better headlines than discussion about craft. By now, the emotional distance between them had all but disappeared. Kelly's eyes glistened, the first hints of tears forming. She said she respected Emma, admired her, and had no intention of belittling her. Emma countered that respect wasn't just a feeling, it was an action. It was shown through thoughtful questions, not reductive ones. Through creating space for a woman to talk about her achievements, not defending a system that punished her for aging. Their voices softened, but the intensity remained. Kelly admitted she thought she was doing Emma a favor by addressing the circulating criticisms. Emma said the real problem was that Kelly hadn't thought through the weight of her words, the weight of asking a woman if she was bitter for calling out discrimination. Kelly looked genuinely shaken now, not angry, not defensive, just overwhelmed. She apologized again, this time without excuses, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. Emma sighed then, a long, weary exhale. She sat back down, and after a moment, Kelly did too. There was still tension, but something softer had edged into the room. Understanding, maybe, or the start of it. Emma explained calmly why the question had struck such a nerve. Why it echoed decades of being told she was too much or not enough. Why women's anger was so often dismissed as emotional rather than righteous. Kelly listened, really listened, for the first time in the entire interview. Emma said she didn't expect an apology, only awareness. Awareness that words carry history, that questions are rarely just questions, that women like her had worked too hard, survived too much, and fought too long to be framed as emotional caricatures. Kelly nodded, tears finally rolling down her cheek. She apologized a final time, not for asking a question, but for the way she asked it, for the way she framed it, for the blind spots she hadn't recognized. There was a long pause. A stillness filled the studio. Then, unexpectedly, Emma reached across the small table and placed her hand gently over Kelly's. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was simply human. An acknowledgement that two women, both trying to navigate impossible expectations, had collided painfully in public. The audience exhaled together, some wiping their eyes, others whispering to one another. Kelly laughed nervously, wiping her face, and Emma gave a small, tired smile. The interview never returned to its original light-hearted rhythm, but it softened into something different, more honest, more vulnerable, more real. The cameras eventually cut. The applause was hesitant at first, then warm, then thunderous. No one quite knew what they'd witnessed. But everyone was certain it was going to be talked about for a very long time, because this wasn't just television. It wasn't just an awkward interview. It was a rare, unfiltered moment where two women collided over the ways the world expects them to behave, and what happens when they refuse.